When people talk about economics, they usually go straight to Adam Smith, Karl Marx, or if we go a little further back, Aristotle. But there are also sides of this story that are rarely talked about. There is a thinker from the Middle Ages whose words about money and society still feel incredibly relevant even today. Around 1,000 years ago, there was no capitalism and no central banking. But a Muslim scholar began to say something important. If money becomes detached from morality, society starts to rot from the inside. And honestly, when you look at the world we live in today, it is not hard at all to see that he may have been right. To understand Al-Ghazali, you first need to imagine the world he lived in. The year is around the 1100s. Europe is still fragmented, poor, and trying to recover. In contrast, the Islamic world is spread across a vast geography. Imagine a rich, powerful, and vibrant world stretching from Al-Andalus to Persia. Cities like Baghdad, Damascus, and Cairo are not just major cities, they are also centers of trade, knowledge, and power. Caravans carry silk, spices, textiles, and silver. Scholars discuss philosophy, law, astronomy, and medicine. The markets are full, trade is alive, and wealth keeps growing. But this is where a problem begins to appear. Society is getting richer, markets are expanding, yet something is also starting to break down. Al-Ghazali was one of the people who noticed this. He was a philosopher, a jurist, a theologian, and also a very powerful critic. In other words, he was someone who could speak about both the human soul and the monetary system with the same seriousness. He was born in 1058 in the Persian region, and quickly became one of the most respected figures of his time. While still in his 30s, he rose to one of the most important academic positions in the Islamic world. But what made him special was not his title. What made him different was that he questioned the system. Because he noticed something. Yes, wealth was increasing. Yes, trade was growing. But people were drifting away from meaning. Money was multiplying, yet values were decaying. The economy looked strong from the outside, but it was rotting from within. The question Al-Ghazali asked was very simple, but also very harsh. What happens when a civilization becomes rich faster than it becomes wise? While searching for the answer to this question, he turned his attention directly toward money. Because Al-Ghazali was not just a religious figure, he was also one of the earliest thinkers to examine money through its moral and social effects. So is money just a tool for exchange? Or is it also a force that shapes people's behavior, trust, relationships, and the fate of society? That is exactly what Al-Ghazali looked at. According to him, money is not something people should worship. Money is not the goal, it is a tool. In other words, it is something meant to serve a function. Al-Ghazali compares money to a mirror. A mirror has no value on its own. Its value comes from what it reflects. Money is the same. What matters is not the gold or silver itself, but what it allows people to exchange, produce, and build. In fact, many of the ideas we hear in modern economics appear much earlier in Al-Ghazali's thought. One of his strongest ideas is this: money that does not circulate is dead money. Welcome to History of Money. This is where power, history, and money collide. And nothing is ever as simple as it looks from the outside. If money is sitting in a chest, buried in the ground, or simply being hoarded, then it does not benefit society. It does not reach workers, it does not enter trade, it does not support families, and it does not move the economy forward. On the contrary, it locks life in place. According to Al-Ghazali, wealth that does not circulate is like the blood flow of society coming to a stop. And this is not just a criticism of individual greed, it is a much bigger and more systemic issue. Because when the rich pull money out of circulation, a kind of pressure builds in the market. The resources are already there, they simply stop moving. As a result, prices become distorted, trade slows down, and once again it is ordinary people who suffer the most. After this, Al-Ghazali moves to another very important point. Speculation destroys trust. To him, people taking advantage of opportunities, manipulating prices, turning crises into profit, and creating artificial scarcity is not intelligence, it is moral decay. Profiting from someone else's hardship is, in his eyes, something that eats away at the foundation of society. Because once such a system starts to spread, it is not only one merchant who becomes corrupted. The market becomes corrupted, institutions become corrupted, and in the end, society itself becomes corrupted. Today, people talk about financial bubbles, crisis profiteering, manipulative market behavior, and credit systems that exploit people. And honestly, it feels as if Al-Ghazali had already understood the logic behind all of this around 900 years ago. But let's make one thing clear. Al-Ghazali was not against profit. He was not against trade either. In fact, he believed trade was both necessary and natural. He also did not think wealth was inherently bad. What he opposed was dishonest gain, lying, hiding the defects of a product, using false weights, manipulating information, and deceiving people. According to Al-Ghazali, markets can only survive if people trust one another. The moment that trust starts to crack, the economy collapses right behind it. In truth, the things that today are described with technical terms like information asymmetry, moral hazard, and transaction costs were explained by Al-Ghazali in a much simpler but much clearer way. If people do not trust one another, the whole order starts to fall apart. Another important idea of his concerns the value of labor. According to him, work is honorable. Money earned through effort builds a person. But money accumulated through cheating, manipulation, and exploitation corrupts a person's character. That may sound a little harsh, but the logic is actually very clear. Societies grow stronger when people genuinely contribute. They grow weaker when people focus only on taking. Al-Ghazali did not only criticize individuals, he also criticized the state, especially rulers who played games with the monetary system. At the time, some rulers reduced the gold and silver content of coins and still used them as if they were the same money. If we think about it in modern terms, it was something like hidden inflation. The state was covering its own deficit, but the people were paying the price. Al-Ghazali called this what it plainly was: theft. Because damaging the value of a currency means damaging the people's trust, and it hurts the poor the most. Their money is already limited, and when its value drops, they are crushed even more. In Al-Ghazali's view, the role of the state is not to manipulate the market, but to be just and to protect trust. One of his harshest warnings is this: poverty does not destroy a society immediately, but corruption certainly does. Economic collapse usually does not happen simply because money runs out, the way many people assume. The real issue is the collapse of trust. If people no longer trust one another, no longer trust institutions, no longer trust the currency, and no longer trust contracts, then the system is already beginning to fall apart. And after that point, even if a country is rich, it becomes fragile. Al-Ghazali was also very clear about money itself. To him, money is ultimately a matter of belief. If people believe in the value of that money, the system works. But if the state keeps interfering with it, sooner or later the public stops trusting it, and people begin to flee from their own currency. They turn towards stronger and safer ones instead. We have seen this not just as theory, but many times throughout history. We saw it in Weimar Germany. We saw it in Zimbabwe. We saw it in Venezuela. We saw it in Argentina. When people no longer want to hold their own country's money, the issue is not just economics. Trust has been completely broken. But Al-Ghazali's point was never only about monetary policy. He also understood human nature extremely well. People hoard when they are afraid. They look for opportunities when they become greedy. They cheat when they think they will get away with it. They normalize what is wrong just because everyone else is doing it. And when a society reaches the point where exploitation becomes normal, collapse has in fact already begun. That is why, according to Al-Ghazali, it is not enough just to change the rules. You also have to fix the incentives that shape human behavior. Because laws matter, markets matter. But in the end, it is always human beings making the decisions, and human beings act through ambition, fear, desire, and self-interest. If the system does not guide these forces in the right direction, the economy begins to decay little by little. Al-Ghazali did not think wealth was completely bad, but he did say that wealth needs a purpose. In other words, if richness exists only for the sake of accumulation, then it is incomplete. A society grows stronger when people start giving more than they take. It grows stronger when a balance is built between accumulation and responsibility. But if wealth becomes detached from society and turns into something focused only on profit, then that order becomes fragile after a while. And the worst part is this: when the system collapses, it is not only the poor who pay the price, the rich do too. Because in the end, a decaying order pulls everyone into it. When we look at the world we live in today, Al-Ghazali's ideas feel almost like a modern analysis. Wealth inequality is growing. People feel less certain about institutions. Markets sometimes reward speculation more than production. Inflation quietly eats away at people's purchasing power. Financial bubbles expand, burst, and then form again. Looking at all this, what Al-Ghazali said does not feel like an old philosophical text. It feels like a diagnosis written for our own time. His criticism of hoarding wealth reminds us of today's debates about billionaires. His criticism of speculation brings to mind today's housing crises, crypto volatility, and opportunistic markets. His opposition to the manipulation of currency goes straight to the heart of modern debates about monetary policy. And perhaps most importantly, he reminds us of this. Trust is the foundation of prosperity. If there are fair courts, strong institutions, predictable rules, and transparent governance, then the economy becomes more resilient. If these are missing, then even the strongest-looking system begins to crack from the inside. And maybe the most surprising thing of all is this. The world has not really changed that much. Technology changed, markets became faster, everything became global. But human beings are still the same. Ambition is the same, fear is the same. Distrust keeps growing in the same way. If Al-Ghazali were alive today, he would probably say this. When justice disappears, prosperity cannot stand for long. And that is honestly an uncomfortable but accurate point. Economies do not collapse only because of numbers. They collapse when people stop trusting one another. They collapse when institutions fail to protect justice. They collapse when the wrong behaviors are rewarded. In short, the issue is not just money. The real issue is the kind of values within which money circulates. And that is Al-Ghazali's greatest strength. He reminds us of something important. Money is not a mechanical thing. It is not just a technical tool. Money is also part of a moral ecosystem. And if that moral foundation breaks down, the financial system will sooner or later collapse with it. That is exactly why his ideas still matter today. Because in an age where debt is rising, people are anxious, trust in institutions is falling, and speculation is becoming normal. He tells us something very simple but very important. If money becomes completely detached from morality, the system will eventually break. And understanding this is not just economic knowledge. It is also a form of self-protection. Because even if history does not repeat itself exactly, if you fail to understand it, it will crush you anyway.